So good morning everyone and welcome to Towards the Global, which is actually, it's a third in a kind of sequence of courses that I teach that are to do with art from the late 19th century to the present day. It's the last of that sequence, and it covers art from after the Second World War. Maybe if we put them over here, then we can lay them out as different piles if someone comes later. But each of those courses is completely self-contained. You don't actually have to have taken the others. You could have bought the whole set, but you don't have to. So it covers quite a long time period, but it's actually a sort of kind of pear-shaped structure, you could say, in that I'm going to put most of my attention to the earlier part of that time period. My idea for doing that is partly that actually there's so much art has been made since 1945, we can't cover it all. So I'm going to place much more attention to what I see as a kind of foundational period for art that's still happening today, basically from 1945 through the 60s and 70s. And then on top of that, I'll start to introduce you to selected artists who follow along with tendencies that have already had their foundation during that time period. There's a certain kind of problem about teaching concerning contemporary art. Some people do try to have courses specifically on contemporary art, but what you'll find is that information has a high degree of obsolescence. If you take a book about contemporary art that was written 10 years ago, you'll find a lot of those artists, they haven't actually sort of sustained their reputation. They were hot 10 years ago, but that doesn't mean they're hot now. So you get a kind of, and there's a whole bunch of new artists that weren't around 10 years ago. So studying contemporary art in that kind of artist by artist way can be a bit dissatisfying. You find that your knowledge base is as you go on through life, is not so useful. So I'm concerned with trying to understand some of the basic principles and approaches, tendencies, which I see as continuing through and informing even art making today. I'm more concerned to try to give you tools that you can navigate independently whatever comes up. We don't know what contemporary art will be tomorrow, actually. So that kind of flexible skills of trying to learn how to deal with stuff that is completely new to you, new to everyone, that's a more valuable skill, I think. And learning to think historically even about recent art. Actually, that's been one of my projects. How do we put together historical thinking and more recent art? Often they're kept in separate boxes. Art historians often talk about slightly older art. They get a bit scared about very recent art sometimes. How do we think historically about the present? We don't know what the present's going to lead to. You can talk about the causes and the consequences of the First World War because we know what came after it, but you can't talk about the consequences of the present. Yeah, please take one of each.
Thank you.
Because we don't know what's going to happen at all. And at the same time, so there's some problems with how art history looks at recent art, but there's also a problem with how the discourse of recent art operates, because often it's a bit historically shallow. It thinks about contemporary art in a separate box. Say, for example, there are a lot of people in the West in the last decade or so who have got quite interested in Chinese contemporary art, but they probably couldn't tell you the name of 5 modern Chinese artists or something like that. They don't really know what came before the contemporary art phenomenon. They think about it in a separate box. I don't think that's too good a thing. So I'm trying to break down that barrier between, you could call it art historical thinking and art criticism, a different kind of discursive space, if you want. So what I'll spend a lot of time talking about will be abstract expressionism. That's thought of as the first main movement in post-war art. I'll talk about other developments in abstract art after that time. I'll talk about pop art. I'll talk about minimalism, environmental art, installation art, performance art, body art, conceptual art, new trends in figurative art. Pick out certain figures in those tendencies, focusing more on when those trends start to appear, but then looking at more recent artists who fit into the same tendency. And those of you who studied with me in either of the 2 courses that came before this chronologically will know that we were focusing mostly on European art, with a little bit of Chinese art as a way of culturally decentering it, to remind ourselves that Europe is only one part of the world. In this course, the initial focus, at least, will be on art in America. You can say that's one of the big changes that happens after the Second World War. A kind of focus of the art world moves to New York from Paris. It's a complex process, but I think it's understandable, at least in part, because of the war itself and the destruction that occurred on the European continent. Whereas, apart from the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the United States was basically saved from any physical involvement with the war on its own territory. And a lot of interesting artists from Europe went as emigres to America and helped to fuel a kind of critical mass there of artistic and intellectual culture. And it's also, I suppose, due to America's economic rise. It was already a very major economic power in the pre-war period, but actually in post-war period even more dominant, and even still today the largest economy in the world. So it's not surprising if cultural power moves, if not exactly directly in sync, but partly allied to political power, economic power. So we'll be looking at a lot of American artists. Abstract expressionists were the first generation where we see America really seeming to take a kind of center stage in the story of modern art. Pop art also had a very strong American flavor to it, concerned with American popular culture. Actually, there was a British pop art phenomenon, and it did happen a little bit in other places as well, but especially there. So we'll be talking about that story. There's partly a sort of truth to that story, as I'm saying, of cultural centrality moving from Europe to America after the Second World War. But there's also a certain kind of ideological story that has sometimes been told about, modern art starts in Europe with, Van Gogh and Cézanne and Picasso, and then it moves to North America with abstract expressionism. And that story was often told when art historians were quite interested in what you could call a formalistic approach to art history, an approach where they emphasized a story of modern art where it's getting more and more pure and abstracted, and abstract expressionism seemed to be to fit very nicely into that story as being more abstracted than the art that was made in Europe before that time, and then some of the later American art that followed on, also abstract art, seemed to be even more pure. So there's a certain kind of ideology about stylistic development art that seemed to tell a story that moved to America. And that sort of ideological dimension to the story is one that I think is not really that tenable and has been widely criticized. I mean, the first people to criticize that story of abstract purity were artists themselves, like the pop artists could be amongst those who were part of that story, instead of concerned with purified, abstract, formal concerns. They were concerned with popular culture, mass-reproduced images, the everyday world around us. So a kind of defiling of the purity of abstract art. And even within abstract art itself, suddenly there's a kind of logic that if you push something to its extreme, then it almost deconstructs itself. That idea is quite well expressed by the English Romantic poet William Blake when he said, "The fool who persists in his folly becomes wise." You know, you become wise by really kind of following on forever with one route until you really realize that it's the wrong route, and then you've definitely learned something, and then you can go by a different route. If you follow through the logic consistently, you'll discover that. But if you just dabble with this and that, maybe you never learn too much. So there's a kind of breakthrough. First it happened with artists, then it happened with art historians and art critics, people who were interpreting art. And you could call that moment a kind of moment of postmodernism. That's actually a rather sort of dated terminology now. You don't hear the notion of modernism being replaced by postmodernism so much nowadays. Mostly if people want to pair the word modern with another word, they'll pair it with the word contemporary, modern and contemporary art. But postmodernism is often thought of as a moment where some grand story of art's modern progress breaks down, that we can't believe in such stories anymore. And then there's a room for a greater plurality in art. And in that sense, there's some truth to it. The funny thing was that when art started to accept plurality and art and its interpretation started to not really want to believe in one story of where art was going. Nevertheless, art still seemed to remain a kind of Western phenomenon. Maybe the Europeans started to come back a bit, not just the Americans at that point. But it's really not till the 1990s that you see a kind of globalization in art, where the whole non-Western world starts to get mapped into the story of art. That's a moment of globalization. That kind of postmodern moment allowed that to happen, but it didn't really happen straight away. It took a bit of time to happen. Maybe it starts to happen first with people from different ethnic minority groups within Western countries starting to get their art better understood and more widely disseminated. But then it spreads from that to artists from other parts of the world. And actually Chinese art played a very important part in that story in the late 1990s and since. Chinese contemporary art helped to be one of the sort of flag bearers for non-Western contemporaneity in art. So we'll look a little bit at all that. So this is the kind of broad sort of trend happening in the period we're looking at. First, a kind of shift from Europe to North America, and then a kind of diversification that leads to the art of the whole world somehow coming into play. And clearly that's such a big topic, we can't deal with each individual artist. There's so many artists working today, you know. If you're talking about Renaissance Florence. How many artists actually were there in Renaissance Florence? So really a small handful. You could walk around in Florence. Oh, hi, Michelangelo. You'd all kind of know each other. Really, it's all a fairly small world. But now it's really just impossible to keep a clear picture of what artists are active in our own lifetime. Especially if we take this kind of globalized perspective, which I think we have to if we're in a place like Hong Kong. It's a very globally connected city, and we're outside the Western world. If you pick up most books about modern and contemporary art, you'll find still that actually they're books about Western art, because actually it's rather hard, who knows enough to write the rest of the world into that story. Who could do it? Even the supposedly most up-to-date books find it hard to do that. Maybe we should even try to say, well, it's impossible to tell one story of all art today. Maybe we have to accept that we can't understand everything that's going on. We can't understand what's happening in Latin America and in all the different Asian countries, etc., etc. So all this is kind of just the way things are. We have to accept that that's the way things are. Art is a much bigger field. And it's kind of exciting in a way that contemporary art, we're always being confronted by things which we don't have a pre-existing frame to place in. We don't have a kind of set of pigeonholes. We think, oh, this is a number 3 type art, goes in number 3 mentor pigeonhole. Yeah, I know what all that is. Baroque, Rococo, or whatever. Baroque art has dramatic lighting and the naturalistic, and okay, put it in that box. But with contemporary art, you can't do that. It doesn't really work, and that could be slightly frightening in a sense. But actually, this is really interesting. What it means is we're encountering things which don't fit our existing thinking. It has the potential to change our thinking. We may need to redesign our mental pigeonholes. It may be very interesting to do so, and we're learning to. We don't have a handout that tells us all the important things, and we can just follow that checklist and in a sense sort of reduce the richness of experience to some neat story. We can change ourselves by paying attention to that art. Art has that power to transform us. So a really good thing. That's why we're interested in art. Actually, all art should be like that. Even if you're looking at Baroque art, you'll see all kinds of differences from one artist to another. If you really look closely, it can surprise you in exactly the same way as recent art. It's a funny thing that recent art, somehow we should be able to understand it better because it's from our own time and place. So we don't have to understand the cultural context to know, what did people believe in 14th century Florence or whatever, But somehow art of our own time and place can seem very difficult to deal with, but harder to place. So we're always sort of learning about pluralism, I suppose, or accepting difference, learning to appreciate difference. We don't have to like everything that we see. In fact, I'd be surprised if you liked all of the art you'll see in this course. That might be a sign that you're a bit indiscriminate in your taste, that you don't have your own values. If everything, I like everything. But I want you to at least try to take it on its own terms. Try to, just like if you meet someone from a completely different cultural environment, you want to kind of understand where they're coming from, why they would say something like that, why they believe something like that. You don't need to share the belief necessarily, but you want to understand why someone would think that and what's involved in looking at the world from that perspective. Any questions about what I'm saying so far? I'm just sort of in a kind of rambling way trying to introduce something about the content of the course. I'll move on to talk something about the course itself and its assessment and so forth in a minute. So in this course, I don't tend to have that many handouts. Usually there are quite a few on the first day to give you the introduction to the course. But usually I'm only just going to give you a list of the artworks, a list of images. So a kind of very bare bones, simple bit of information. I'm not trying to. The course is not. I don't have a sort of set group of ideas that I have, and I want to give them to you, and I want you to learn them, and then I'll test you on them in an exam or something like that. There is no fixed knowledge because actually I have my approach, but this course is not about me getting you to think like me, It's about you learning to think your way and test your own ways of thinking further. You already have your own ways of thinking, but hopefully every education experience will challenge you a little bit further down that road towards, refining your own beliefs, questioning your own beliefs, maybe so you can strengthen them, or so you can change them. It depends what you want to do. It's about you, not about me. It's about your knowledge, not about my knowledge. It's about how you want to see things, not how I happen to see things. So often my own views I'll sort of kind of downplay. I won't necessarily be telling you what I think a lot about individual artists. So the lectures are not. Well, two things. One is the style of the lectures. I'm not trying to put across a particular set of ideas. So if my lectures is more like would be more like a swimming pool that you can swim through, and each of you could swim in a slightly different way, rather than a glass of water where you must drink every drop. Otherwise you haven't got the lecture. So you'll make notes, but each of you may make different notes. You get different things from the lecture. Sometimes it's not even so important about what notes you make. Sometimes it's more interesting to look at the image and think about things rather than to spend all your time trying to write down the supposed pearls of wisdom of your teacher. Actually, my lecture is just one possible source of information for you. The lectures aren't the course. That's probably quite an important point. The lectures are just actually a rather minor detail. Probably the most important things that you're doing are reading books and articles about the art that you're studying, and writing notes, thoughts in response to what you've read, and later writing things for your presentations and your essay, and looking at images, not just what you read, what you see. Now, inevitably, a lot of the things we'll talk about you can only look at illustrations of, because the originals are somewhere else. Although whenever you do have an opportunity to actually look at works of art, please do so. And you're really lucky compared to students studying in Hong Kong, say 20 years ago, in that nowadays Hong Kong is one of the world's top 3 auction sites, with Sotheby's and Christie's and everything holding major auctions here. And it's also one of the 3 sites for Art Basel, the main contemporary art fair in the world. Even art from, of course, a lot of the art sold here is Asian art, but there is nevertheless, both at those auctions and the art fairs, etc., examples of works by artists from other parts of the world, and the same is true of the various different commercial art galleries in town. So I think it is a really important part of your time to spend looking at the best art you can find. Let's not try to be too logocentric, don't feel you have to see what someone has written about art before you can look at it. Don't always have someone's approach in mind. Just go directly sometimes to art, just as you would listen to some music without necessarily feeling you need to read what a musicologist has said about that music. You can learn just by repeated exposure to unfamiliar kinds of music. So there's no fixed pathway. It's all about what you want to get out of your study. And for me, the focus is more on the transferable skills, the skills that are really going to be important to you in your future life. So learning to think critically, learning how to do research, how to frame a topic and to research that topic, and to write up and communicate in writing and in spoken words about a topic. These are really valuable life skills. You may never study or practice art history again, but those skills could stay with you in all kinds of different life and work situations. A lot of what you're going to learn as students you'll forget, and that's natural, and you've probably already forgotten a lot of what you learnt when you were at school, right? Lots of details are probably gone. They will go later anyway if they haven't gone now. And it doesn't matter, because you can just look something up. Once you've learned how to access information, you can re-access information you already had. It's the higher level skills that are the more important ones. And nowadays so much information is just one Google away anyway. The information is so close at hand. You don't need to hold it in your brain so much. You can just let it be available to you when you need it. So it's the skills that are the important thing, the higher level skills. So we're focusing a little bit more on that. So no textbooks, partly because there just isn't a textbook that is really kind of endorsable for this more globalized arena we're in with art now, but also because I dislike that whole approach of relying on one person's approach to things. It's like trying to walk on one foot. Oh, you can do it, but why not? Why, if you had 8 legs like an octopus, you'd use all 8, right? So you want to read different perspectives. You want always to have as many different approaches. Don't trust your teacher. Don't trust me. I may make mistakes. I may have prejudices. I'm just one source of information amongst many. Definitely, you should look at other sources of information. If you read a book, a good academic book, you're reading a book potentially by someone who's spent half their life studying that particular artist or topic. Your teachers won't have studied each of all of those topics for half their life. How could they have done? They may have their own speciality. But no one can be a specialist in everything. So of course you're going to respect the work people have done in in their individual research and draw upon that. So above all, learning to think critically. That's the main thing you're trying to get out of your education. Education is a subversive activity. It's going to change you. Watch out. By the time you finish your studies, you're going to be a different person. And if it changes you, then it has some potential to change the whole world. So about assessment, there are three major assessments. All this information is actually there in the About the Course handout. I want you to read this one carefully. Partly, this is like, if you're in a supermarket and you pick up a tin, you might read what's on the tin to find out what's inside before you buy it. What additives and preservatives are in it, what healthy things might be in it. Well, read this in the same way before the end of the ad drop period, to find out what's on the tin of this course, whether you like the approach of this course or not. Maybe other kinds of courses are more suitable for you. Everyone is different. Up to you. So assessment, three main tasks that you'll have to do. The most important task, the biggest task, is writing an essay, a long essay, on a topic of your own interest. This is all part of what I'm trying to emphasize in this course about it's about you. It's about you because you have to decide what the topic will be. It's an opportunity to get on the thread or further down the thread of your own interest, your own creativity. So some self-directed study project. Don't think so much of it as an essay writing task. Think of it as a research project. Getting the research work done is the most important thing, and then how to write that up, that's a separate question almost. Don't be too goal-directed about it, I've got to get my essay done. Think of it as it's a great opportunity to investigate something that interests you. Sadly, many of you will go on to do jobs where nobody will care what you personally think about something. You just do it. Just get on with it and get it finished by 5 p.m. It's got to go out to whatever. That's kind of the nature of a lot of jobs. But right here and now, this is a wonderful thing. I am very, very interested in what you personally have to say and what personally interests you. This is the wonderful thing about being a student. So find out what does interest you. It's about exploring further your own interests. Again, all these are transferable skills. It's much harder if you haven't been assigned an essay topic. You've got to do a lot of reading just to get to the point of discovering what will be of interest to you. But this is really valuable. It's about learning to operate in a situation where there's no fixed boundaries. That's what life is like actually. You have to decide everything for yourself if you're going to actualize yourself in any real way. It's like sailing out of sight of the shore, and then you have to know how to navigate on your own. You can't rely on some landmark. So I think the way to start is you've got to kind of go horizontally reading about different topics. It could be any topic really within the art and visual culture from around 1945, the end of the Second World War, till now. As I say, my own emphasis in the lectures is going to be slightly more on the earlier part of that period, because I'm going to emphasize foundations more. But here is partly where you get to co-design the course. You get, each one of you customizes the course to your own interest by writing about what interests you. So if you actually are more interested in some contemporary artist, then you can write about that artist. That's fine. Anything is fine. What I'm thinking, I don't give it a sort of specific word limit of how long the essay should be, but usually, say if it's a double-spaced essay, normal size, typeface, it will probably not be less than about 10 pages. It could be longer. I don't like to define it in terms of size, because it's about the amount of work you put into it. It should be a substantial piece of work. So you're reading, first you're reading to expose yourself to the full diversity of art of this period. What that will involve will be you're reading ahead of where we are in the class, because it'll take time for us to reach a certain point. You know, you already have to decide your essay before we've reached and covered many of the things that the course will eventually cover. So you have to read ahead. It's one way of encouraging you to do your own reading about this time period. And then, you know, you'll discover things that you weren't familiar with, even if you know the period very well already. Fantastic. But then you can get to know it even more, discover even more artists that you weren't aware of. And once you find something that intrigues you, it's going to be more about your own personal intellectual and visual interests, come from your heart as much from your mind. It's something that touches you in some way. That's the interesting thing with art. Your whole being can be involved with it. It's not a purely intellectual thing. And then, you know, what you want to do is to try to do a bibliographic search, find out what books, what articles have been written about that topic. It could be an individual artist, it could be a theme, it could be framed in all sorts of different ways. And then you'll read sort of in depth about that topic, and then something will start to come up. It might sound a bit vague, but I know that this process works because it's worked for so many students over the years. You will, trust the process. In a way, the whole course is more about the process than it is about the results. Like I say, there's no particular thing that you have to cover, that we have to cover. It's about getting the process of study working, getting those core transferable skills developed further. Now, I want you to okay your topic with me, not because I want to sort of police the topic. I'm happy whatever topic you have, but I may be able to give you some kind of feedback about framing it. Sometimes students will come up with topics that I happen to know are just too vast, that you'll never be able to cover all of that. Sometimes it's a topic that's really too narrow. It could be very interesting, but I just know there won't be enough material on that. Actually, with art history or history in general, that can often be a problem. There are lots of interesting questions we have that we just can't answer because there isn't historical information. Most obviously, those would be questions about very early periods of human life before humans left written records and things like that. Especially if you are having problems defining a topic, then that's the time to get in touch with me. If something's not sort of, you're trying but it's not working, then let's have a conversation. Come to me after the class or send me an email. I'm very happy to hear from you at any time, and will try as promptly as I can to give you some feedback. Don't just let things slide if you find that things are not working well. I want you to have a topic to me by reading week. That's halfway through the course. There's a kind of midterm break. I suggest trying to get ahead with it right now. I suggest starting with the reading that you'll need to do straight away, because to be honest, I think that the first half of the course, and especially the first few weeks of the course, you probably have less burdens in terms of assignments and assessments. It's a good time to get ahead with. If you there's a natural human tendency to want to do everything at the last minute, but that is going to be a part of the course where a lot of other assignments will have come up. It'll be the most difficult thing, most pressure on you to try and get everything done at that time. And there's one handout all about essay writing. Hope you can look at that. It identifies what are the main problems people have with essay writing, and right at top of the list is time management. If I had to say what is the one thing that prevents students getting as good a grade as they are capable of getting, I would say it's sort of bad time management. Even a great student who just doesn't have enough time to read all the books on a topic that they are working on, or doesn't have time to go through more than one draft with their essay, they're not going to do as well as they can. So give yourself time by starting earlier. Time management is one of the most valuable transferable skills to develop. I kind of emphasize this quite a lot. And it's not an easy one. We're all still struggling with it. There's never a point where anyone I know is perfect about time management. I'm waiting at the moment for various of my colleagues to get back to me with email responses, because things are urgent. But it's always like that. It's always like that. But you just have to try and get ahead as much as you can. It's something you definitely want to try and improve on where you can. So my advice is using the first half of the semester. Don't wait till you learn everything from the lectures, because that will be too late. By the time we've got to that point, it's all too late. And another common tendency is for people to want to write an essay on what we've covered in the lectures. So then that will be a lot of people writing about what is covered in the first 3 or 4 weeks of lectures, something like that. But that's very narrow. That's very narrow. I want you to consider the whole of the time period. Interrogate your own interests. Extend your own interest. So a kind of sign that you're really getting there with your work on your essay is when you've read different books and articles about a topic, and you're starting to get a sense that there are different ways in which people are talking about this. There are issues at stake. Actually, this is really what you're looking for, is an issue of interpretation, something where there's two sides to a story, and you have to work out where you stand on it. Not, we all agreed that the story of this artist is this, and let me tell it again in my essay. That's not really what intellectual life is like. It's all about, when you get close to art history, there's always or any intellectual field, there's always an argument going on about how to interpret things. And you want to situate yourself in that argument. You want to read what other people say first, like if you're joining a circle of a conversation, you want to wait to hear what they're talking about, what the different opinions are, before you start saying what you think. Same thing with an essay. You've got to see what people who spent half their life writing about that artist or topic have got to say first. And then you can stand on their shoulders, even if you're not as tall as they are. you can see further than them, maybe, actually, because you're standing on their shoulders. So it doesn't have to be a single artist. It could be any geographical area. It doesn't have to be the artist we've talked about in the class at all. The second assessment thing is a presentation. Now that's where I come to talk about tutorials. So in most fine arts classes, the tutorials involve a set reading, and then you discuss those set readings in the tutorial. So that's probably what you'll find in most of your courses. But that's very valuable, but it's not what I do in this course. I'm trying to use tutorials for you to make your individual presentations on topics of your interest. Again, it's about me wanting to push it back and saying it's about you, not me telling you what the agenda is. It's about you telling me what your agenda is, what your interests are. So you become co-designers of the course. And unlike with the essay, where it's just between you and me, the presentation is for the whole group. So you really get to co-design the course. You really get to determine part of what the content that we're all studying is going to be. And that, for me, is an incredibly interesting part of the course, partly because I get to see your individual personalities and interests coming up. And my general experience is that Hong Kong U students do really well at verbal presentations, even when they've never done one before in their life, you know. Strangely, they seem to pick up the skill really well. And this is so important in all kind of areas of life, to be able to, you know, your boss can say, oh yeah, I want you to make a 50-minute presentation in the next meeting about, you know, sales in Mongolia or whatever, you know, it is that you're doing with your life. And, you know, oh yeah, so how to persuade, you know, the Mongolian sales team that they should be doing A rather than B, you know. How do you persuade them? You've got to have a good arguments, and you've got to have all the facts at your disposal to back up what you're saying. Well, here's where you start with all that. So it will be a very short presentation, probably say 8 minutes, I think. Well, I'll have to decide exactly the length of the presentation when I know exactly how many of you are in the group. But usually it works out around 8 minutes. A short presentation that's got particular attributes. I don't want to use the word problems, opportunities in itself. You know, you've got to get your ideas across really quickly. You can't spend a long time doing an introduction. Or a common kind of error would be, say, well, first I want to give you some background about you know, the artist was born in and they went to school in, but actually you're not talking about that. You're talking about some issue about their art. So why not launch straight in? The example I like to give is like Beethoven's Fourth Symphony. How does it start? Da 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 da. You know, straight in. It doesn't say, well, I think first I better give them a bit of background, you know, and no, straight in, you know. Or how does a Bond film start? Some action chase, right? You know, it always starts with some action. So launch straight in. You know, at the beginning of your talk, that's the time when your audience is most attentive to hear what you have to say. So use that fresh moment to get your main point across. 8 minutes, if that's how long it will be, will go really fast. So this is an interesting thing, how to get an idea across very quickly. That's a particular challenge. It's different when you're giving, you know, I have 2 hours of your time practically. I can take a kind of leisurely approach and this very, you know, disjointed kind of presentation. But if I had to give an 8-minute presentation, it would have to be very different to this. So your task is about getting your audience's attention. You've got to think about your audience. It's about them. It's about communication, getting the idea across clearly. If you do have background information that's important, one thing you can do is to create a handout. And Mr. Yan in our department office can photocopy that for you, and then everyone has that information at hand, and you can refer them to things on it. So this is how we'll spend the tutorials. We'll have individual presentations and brief discussions of them. So you've got to be prepared to lead a discussion, to answer questions. You've got to have a kind of in-depth knowledge of your topic to be able to do that. They may ask you things that aren't specifically in your presentation, but you may need to answer them. Don't write a script and then read it word for word. Now, there are situations where that's useful to do that. Sometimes if I'm giving a formal guest lecture, I want to pack as much into 1 hour as I can. And there are some situations where I might actually read from a text. It can create a slightly boring delivery, but actually it could be rather useful. I went to a talk someone gave about a week ago where he did exactly that. And the talk was much more valuable because he read it than if he just tried to chat a little bit. It was packed full of information, really valuable. But that's not what I'm asking you to do within your 8 minutes. I'm asking you to learn to speak from notes, but not read from a script. Because in a lot of situations, that would not be appropriate to read from a script. Those Mongolian sales team, you can't read from your script when you're talking to them. You've got to explain directly to them. So that's the task. Almost always people will give a PowerPoint presentation. What you'll do is you'll bring your talk along on a memory stick, and we'll have a computer set up, and just quickly at the beginning put it into the computer, and then you can present from that. But that's not actually a requirement. You could present in some other way if you wanted to. It almost always is that way, but that's not a rule. It's just the common thing. And the third main assessment is a class test. That's going to be probably in the second to last week from the end of the semester. And I would say the first 2 assignments, start thinking about it now, start working on it now. The tutorials, in most courses in fine arts anyway, the tutorials will be spread out through the semester. In our case, it'll be different. Once we start the tutorials, they'll go on every week until everyone's given their presentation. So there'll be like a kind of block. So that's the thing that's going to come up first. You need to put emphasis on that. The essay is a major thing, even though the deadline will be around the end of the semester. It's a major thing, so I suggest thinking about that now as well. The test is later. I would say don't worry about that for now. The main thing in the test will be testing your skills at visual analysis and thinking about art. That's a very generic kind of skill. So everything that you read, everything that you write, everything that you look at, including my lectures, will help you with those tests. Developing your language and personal method for approaching works of art. That's really what you want to do. You don't want to just learn a bunch of information about particular works of art, because as you go through your life, you're visiting Venice. Okay, let's go into this church and see what works of art there. Maybe there's some art that you didn't study in your class. So what? You've learned how to approach works of art. You'll have a way of engaging with them. you go to the Art Basel, there's bound to be in the spring, if you're here and going to Art Basel, you'll find art that no one has ever seen before. It's never been reproduced before. There's nothing that you've studied about it. So what? You'll have skills to deal with it. So, just learning up some facts about individual works of art, which is how some people approach tests, is, I think, not the best strategy. And because I'm working against that notion, I'm not selecting certain artworks that I will test you on. I'm not saying these are the things that you'll be tested on. And therefore you can use that strategy of just being really good at memorizing a bunch of things. Hong Kong students seem really good at memory skills. So I'm not worried about that, actually. I think you probably have at least as much memory skills, most of you, that you will need. I want to develop other things. When I did was tested as a student from images, they could be any images, but I'm going to be kinder to you than that. I'm going to say I'm only going to show you images that I've shown you in the lectures. That's already a lot of different images, but it's much narrower than I had to deal with. So you could say you're lucky in that respect. Okay, so those are the three main assessments, and I'll say more about the tests later as we get closer to that. But what you can do to prepare for it now is just reading and note-taking and thinking about art and thinking about your method of approaching and understanding works of art, which is something you're developing in all your courses anyway, not just in this one. So any questions about assessments? There must be something I forgot to say or which I didn't say very clearly. Of course, please read about the course handout, which covers that issue of assessments in more detail.
About the class, the
Yeah.
tutorial presentation,
Yeah.
will there be specific topics each week, or
No.
depending on the
No.
person?
Well, each person will decide their specific individual topic. So I'm not trying to tell you in any way what those topics will be. So we'll jump around a bit, but that's kind of interesting. Usually there are some interesting conjunctures between the different things that people talk about, even if it's from different countries and time periods. Often we find, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Those presentations, go well together in some way. So every presentation is an individual presentation. You work on your own, but then you bring it to the group. What I'm kind of hoping is that this class is fairly small, so we might see if we can just have one tutorial group, and then we all get to know everyone's presentation. It's just about small enough that we might be able to do that. But let's see. What I'm trying to do is to get your information about your availability for tutorial slots. We have this Friday slot for this course, which, remember, I cancelled last week, and it's cancelled until further notice. Don't turn up on Friday, the third lecture slot. Don't turn up on Friday until I tell you to. Now, we could use that slot for our tutorials. I know you're all available at that time slot because that's a timetable slot. But I need to get your information from you about when you're available for other possible tutorials, in case I have to break you into groups. So I need your preference for these three slots. Yes or no, are you available? And if you are, what is your preference, 1 to 3? So if I have to break you into groups, then I will try to, as much as I can, to deal with your preferences. So what I want is for you to tear off the second sheet and give it back to me today. The top sheet you can keep because that may have some useful information for you about tutorials. So in a second we'll have a little break. Then after the break I'll actually show you some images to give you a little digital taste of what we're going to cover in the course. but during the break, could you try and quickly fill this in? Don't just fill in your favorite slots. Really, I have to ask you to fill in every slot you're available, because otherwise it just maybe won't work. We end up, not having enough people to fit into a single group. I can't have 4 different groups because that would break you down into tiny presentation groups. So any questions about that? Or any questions about anything? Okay, let's have a little break. And so please, could you fill that in during the break and then bring it up to me when you've done so. And then after the break, we'll look at some images.